Good afternoon. Welcome to our show. I'm your host, Melissa Ridgen, and we have a whole lot in store for you today if you've been watching, like us, the terrorism that's unfolded in Mi'kmaq in recent weeks. And what's happened can't be described as anything less than that, frankly. Mi'kmaq have a treaty right to fish the waters in what is now Nova Scotia, rights that are upheld by the Supreme Court 20 years ago. The problem now is commercial fishers have terrorized them for starting a moderate livelihood fishery. What exactly that is hasn't been defined, and maybe that's part of the problem, but you'll hear from a full slate of guests today, as it's only one part of the big problem. Today we're putting Mi'kmaq harvesting rights in focus, and we are going far beyond the headlines, beyond the violence and the terrorizing, to make sense of the why of all of this. I guarantee you will learn a lot today. And of course, it's a call-in show. You can call us toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. Make your thoughts known on our Facebook Live feed, too, if you feel like that. That's on APTN News' Facebook page. Before we get going with our guests, let's bring you up to speed with the latest from Mi'kmaq.
I'm emotionally drained.
That is Jason Maher and his daughter, Jolene Maher, emotional after a month of violence. Late Friday night, the Lobster pound in Pubnico burnt to the ground. Police report the person of interest is in hospital with life-threatening injuries. It is one of 2 pounds that a mob of over 200 people surrounded. They broke in, stole, and destroyed Lobster, which is Sipekne'katik's moderate livelihood fishery. Maher was barricaded inside. He live-streamed the event.
They've destroyed my van. There's a couple hundred of them out there. And I refuse to leave. I'm not leaving. They said they won't let me leave unless they have my lobsters.
The violence has not stopped. Maher is getting threats.
He hated me. I asked him why. He said, because you're an Indian. And I hate Indians. I gave the text. He texted that to me, and I gave it to the RCMP last night.
Sipekne'katik community members have faced violence, harassment by commercial fishermen since the moderate livelihood fishery was launched a month ago. The commercial fishermen say lobster stocks are low, putting the fishery at risk. They say it's not about racism. Chief Mike Sack was assaulted last week and a van was set on fire. 2 people have since been charged for each incident. The Mi'kmaq lobster harvesters say they will continue to fish. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jilbert, Halifax.
Jolene Maher is a fisher from the Sipekne'katik First Nation. She is the sister of a man who last week was trapped in by a violent mob in that lobster facility that we just saw in New Edinburgh last week. That same facility, of course, was burned to the ground on the weekend, as we saw. We caught up with Jolene on the Saulnieville Wharf yesterday. It's in the heart of where all of this is going on in St. Mary's Bay in Nova Scotia. Actually, before we go to the interview with Jolene, let's take a look so you can actually see what we're talking about here. You can see where she'll be joining us from the Saulnieville Wharf. St. Mary's Bay is that little teeny pocket of water that's in there up on your left-hand side of your screen. Okay, we're going to go, here's the conversation I had with Jolene yesterday. Jolene, how are the Mi'kmaq doing there? Have things settled down since the weekend?
Since there's been more police presence, it's been quiet. We've had the odd few that came through and had their opinions, but it hasn't been as it was before. We're still losing gear daily out in the bay. Other than that, it's been a really good, welcoming education kind of spot for the last week.
So I think I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, just for those of us who are not in the region, have not paid attention to what's going on in terms of the lobster fishing there. I think everybody understands that this is a treaty right, that this has been upheld by the Supreme Court. What people seem to be confused of is that there isn't a definition surrounding what is a moderate livelihood fishery. Can you explain to us, what do the Mi'kmaq feel that is a moderate livelihood? Is it a certain number of lobsters? Is it a certain annual wage?
Not any one person can define a moderate livelihood. I feel a moderate livelihood is different for each person. We are all treaty rights holders, so Myself, I have 5 children at home, so I believe my moderate livelihood would be a little bit different than somebody who is maybe a single person or a couple with one child. Their moderate livelihood would be probably a bit different than my own. This is what we've been waiting for the past 21 years, is for it to be defined for everybody's understanding, for everybody's well-being. I can't defy that, just like I said, as we have to do this as a collective nation, and we all need to sit down and let the government know that this is what we would like. It's unfair to our people that we have been waiting 21 years for this. And this is what it's brought us to, all this animosity, and it's all the government's fault. The government has left this in lingo for far too long. So it's finally come to this, and now we need to sit down and put things out there and start asserting our treaty right even more. We're going to keep going. We have wonderful support around the globe who are sending supplies daily. We have people who are sending traps and buoys and rope and all that kind of stuff. So the support is tremendous. It's wonderful to have everybody reaching out and asking, how can we help? What is there we can do? Supplies have been storming in the door with personal hygiene products, warm clothes for our people on the front lines, gas, generators, food, just people coming down to help a hand. I could go on all day. It's amazing feeling being here with all my brothers and sisters from across Turtle Island that have been able to come.
Well, it's interesting because, as you said, this is 20 years in the making. Why do you think that suddenly everybody is watching this now? Why does suddenly everybody care now?
I think the people who have lived it for the past 20 years has always cared. It hasn't had the eye on the situation for the past 20 years. It's been pretty quiet. Why it's so public now, I'm not too sure, but why this all had come to surface all of a sudden. I'm proud of my government of Sabag for stepping up and saying, okay, well, we've waited 20 years and you haven't implemented anything, so here's our moderate livelihood fishing plan, and this is what we are going to implement. It's been going on for longer than the past month. My brothers have been fishermen here since the New Edinburgh incident 20 years ago.
Have you heard from any support from any of the local fishermen?
We've had lots of locals come down and express their gratitude towards us. We've had lots of locals come forward and bring donations. We've had some local students come down and volunteer some time. We've had a couple local elders that had came down and apologized and wanted to inform us that they don't support what's going on, that they have never had a problem with us fishing here from Saulniéville, and they wish that it would end so we can go back to living our normal life like we had before this all started. And it's been great to hear from the local people, and it's been great that they come forward, but we've had local people who feel threatened by the commercial and non-native fishermen. We have some locals as far as Yarmouth come with donations and say, you know, I'm sorry I can't stay. I don't want my boss to see me here. I could lose my job. And we respect that, and we wouldn't want anybody to put themselves in harm's way to support. There's lots of ways to support. I say the best way to support us is to educate. ask everybody to, that's what I'm asking everybody, is to educate their children, educate their friends, educate their neighbors. There's lots available online, tools online for education purposes. Use them.
Well, Jolene, thanks for taking the time out of your day to share that with us. Stay safe, and hopefully this all gets sorted out sooner rather than later.
I agree. Thank you very much.
There you go. Educate yourself and your kids about treaties. We offered the commercial fishers an invitation to join the show. Nobody had replied to our multiple requests, unfortunately, but we do have them on the record from other media interviews that they've done. We're going to get to some of what they said later. We'll discuss. We're going to go right now to we have a caller. Russ, are you there?
I sure am.
Hey, Russ.
I love APTN. I'm your average white guy. I eat lobster. I love lobster. However, Canada and Turtle Island are countries of plenty. There's plenty for all of us. So there should be some kind of agreement. And Prime Minister Justin, if you watch this, you got to sort this out quick before someone gets killed or several get killed. You got to sort it out. Everybody should get along. There's enough problems in the world as it is right now.
Yeah.
And hey, it's hard enough to get a meal as it is. And you know what? We should all be able to eat because it's there for the taking. It's just how you got to get it.
Yeah.
And the cops got to do something. They overlook all kinds of things. And right now, those fishers are acting like terrorists. Did they do this when Portuguese and the European factory ships came in? No, they did not. Well, I don't get it why they're coming at other Canadians and other people of our land.
Yeah.
Love APTN, and I have enough excuses already.
Thanks
Sort
so
it out.
much. Well, we appreciate you, Russ, for taking the time to call in, and thanks for those sentiments. Okay, let's take a look now at a clip from an APTN Investigates documentary done last year, almost as a lead-up to what we're seeing now.
For the last 4 years, Marilyn Lee Francis has asserted her inherent rights to resources as a Mi'kmaq woman in the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation.
We have an obligation for that balance and for that respect of our Mother Earth and that respect of her resources. It's not just a matter of going out because we can and taking everything just because we can. That's not who we are.
An inherent right, a treaty right, upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada in a decision that sparked conflict. But also success. 20 years later, unresolved questions are on the table, tensions are rising again, and rights are at stake.
If you're putting them in a box, how are you addressing it? You're not.
It's 20 years later, and they're still trying to delay, treaty access and moderate livelihood.
The stories are long, the stories are deep, the trauma is deep.
Trina Roche is the award-winning video journalist behind that documentary, Living Treaties. She's a member of the Gluskap First Nation, a lifelong resident of Mi'kmaq, and she joins us now from our Halifax bureau. Trina, I know you're busy. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us. This is your lived history. This is nothing new to you. It's not just something you've been covering. It's been something you've been living. Is any of what's going on today surprising to you?
No. And I think I had the foresight when I did that documentary last year. I mean, last year was the 20th anniversary of the Marshall decision, and there are so many unresolved questions. So I'm not surprised at the conflict that I'm seeing now. And you heard Jolene Maher call for education. We do have treaty education in the province right now in the school system, but a lot of the people who are in the community, who are in those Acadian communities down there, the coastal communities who are protesting, probably didn't get an education on treaties. And so, I'm from the Gluskap First Nation, but I went to mainstream schools, and I didn't get it growing up.
Yeah.
But Mi'kmaq people know their treaties. They know their treaty rights. You can ask any Mi'kmaq person. It's part of cultural identity It's a real source of pride. And so, and when you go down on the wharf, because I have been down to Saulnieville, there, within the Mi'kmaq community that's there, people who are supporting and the people who are fishing, there is a lot of pride. It's just that when Mi'kmaq people assert rights, conflict follows, and that's what we're seeing play out now. What
should have happened in the past 20 years since the Marshall decision that would have prevented this conflict that we're seeing now, right?
Well, you know, Canada, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, never addressed, they've never fully implemented the Marshall decision. They haven't addressed the big question, which is, you know, what is a moderate livelihood and what do treaty rights look like when they're implemented today? The commercial, communal commercial licenses, you know, that was the response from Canada to the Marshall decision 21 years ago, right, to slide the Mi'kmaq into the existing, you know, commercial fishery. But that's not the treaty right. And to make that clear, and I've said this before, if Donald Marshall Jr. was alive, or anyone who fishes the same way he did, because he caught and sold eels, asserting his treaty right, out of the DFO-regulated season, and without a DFO license, he was charged with illegal fishing. And over the last 21 years, and you see it today still, anyone who fishes the same way that Donald Marshall Jr. did gets their gear seized by DFO, or faces charges for illegal fishing. So you can see the decision hasn't been implemented. Like the commercial access is successful, but it's not addressing the treaty right. And then when Mi'kmaq just go assert, DFO doesn't have any rules to tell their conservation officers those traps are valid, they're legitimate. You can just leave these guys alone. So, you know,
and DFO isn't just regulating themselves from the sounds of it either, right? They're not looking as individual officers saying, "Oh, it's a Mi'kmaq trap." They're just asserting their rights. Let's just leave it be. There's not any of that happening.
No, like DFO does, yeah, there's no, and it's because you have like the language from the minister, you know, you could, if anyone listened to the emergency debate, the language is there, right? Nation to nation reconciliation that they're working on, you know, negotiating a path forward. But at the same time, conservation officers, because Sabaganagati is not the only ban. There's Eskasoni and Baudeladeque, and other bans are starting moderate livelihood fisheries.
Yeah.
But Eskasoni and Baudeladeque in Cape Breton are doing it now, and they're getting their traps seized by DFO out of the water.
Literally today, like just happening today, right?
Right now. And so you have the minister saying, on the one hand, all this great language, and then on the other hand, the conservation officers and enforcement officers out on the water seizing traps. So the actions don't match the words. And that's a problem. It's been a problem for 21 years, and it's a problem today.
And it might still be a problem tomorrow at the rate we're going, right? Trina, thanks for taking the time out of your day to fill us in as we're all trying to, you know, as landlocked people trying to figure out, you know, what's the story behind all of this. So thank you for setting the stage for us.
You're welcome.
So there is a piece of the lobster puzzle that nobody has covered, too, that I wanted to share with you. I was of the impression that this is an issue between two players, the Mi'kmaq and the non-Indigenous commercial fishers. So then I stumbled upon this article written by a woman named Robin Tress. She's with the Council of Canadians. It's an advocacy group that challenges corporate power and advocates for people, the planet, and democracy. So it turns out that there's this mega corporation called Clearwater. If you've ever been to the Halifax airport, they're the ones where you can buy lobster in an assortment of products, and they wrap it all up for you in cooler packages, and you can take it on your plane ride home. They've got little stuffed, cute lobsters. That's Clearwater. If you've eaten lobster, it is probably from Clearwater. So this company fishes 1.6 million pounds of lobster a year. They fish year-round. And they're not like the non-commercial fishers that we're seeing in this, the conflict here in Mi'kmaq. Those ones are called DFO-regulated commercial fishers. Clearwater is not like that. They get their own rules that basically they can tell to the government. Here's to the DFO. Here's what we're doing. We self-regulate. Tress's article is called "Trapped in Conflict: How the Corporate Mega Fishery Clearwater Has Set the Stage for Violent Conflict in Mi'kmaq." You can read her article. Don't read it right now, but write this down, Canadians.org. Read it later. I guarantee you it contains a lot of information that you have not read elsewhere, and it helps make sense of what's going on. I talked with her yesterday. Check it out. Robin, if you could explain for us kind of the magnitude of Clearwater in the lobster fishery there compared to what we see with the commercial fishers and then the Mi'kmaq in the grand scheme of all of this.
So Clearwater is quite an enormous fishing company. They use one huge fishing boat to fish all of Lobster Fishing Area 41, I should say. And they've got about 6,500 traps on their boat, whereas typical owner-operator commercial boats regulated by DFO have about 400 traps on one boat, and a Mi'kmaq moderate livelihood fishing boat would have about 50 traps total.
Okay, so then what would be I mean, we all know, we've seen the headlines, we've seen the social media videos. There is a lot of tension here. What we haven't seen is anything involving Clearwater. Until your article, I'd never even seen that name involved and mentioned it in any of this. But what effect does Clearwater have on these tensions?
I think it's obviously this issue is really complex, and so I'm glad that we were able to talk about Clearwater now, because they are one element of a lot of pieces that come into this conflict. But I think that people don't typically realize that when we're talking about the conflict between settler fishers doing violence and Mi'kmaq fishers trying to exercise their right, there's also a history of Clearwater, this massive company, getting special treatment from both provincial and federal governments. And that's been happening throughout the entire time that the federal government has failed to live up to the Marshall decisions that were made 21 years ago. So throughout the time that they were criminalizing Donald Marshall Jr. for fishing out of season, and then the 21 years that they failed to take action on that Supreme Court decision, they were cutting sweetheart deals with Clearwater to consolidate the lobster fishery.
So what's the relationship between the commercial fishers who are opposing the Mi'kmaq fishing out of season, which out of season, what we've talked about earlier on the show, what that season entails? It's an economic thing. It's not about lobster conservation. But if you could explain to us some of the dynamic of the relationship between it sounds like kind of almost like the middlemen in all of this. There's the big Clearwater over here and the Mi'kmaq, the little guys over here, and then the middle people in all of this are the independent commercial fishers. What is their relationship like with Clearwater then?
I mean, I'm not a fisherman, so I don't know exactly what those relationships are like, but I know that Clearwater has its own management agreements that they wrote, and they do their own monitoring. And they don't release much of the science that they produce on their own boat because they call it proprietary. So Clearwater operates really as like a lone wolf on its own. And I know there are some relationships with some fishers who work with Clearwater, but I'm not an expert on that. But then there's the kind of second category of people who fish for lobster, and they would be called like owner operators. So they have one license and one boat, and they fish during the DFO regulated season. And they couldn't be more different. Like, for example, Clearwater, between 2014 and 2018, they got almost $5 million in loans and gifts from the federal and provincial governments. They make their own management plans. They don't fish in a season like those owner operators do. And they're subject to almost no oversight, where the inshore fishery and the owner operators are quite highly regulated. So it's like night and day between Clearwater and small scale lobster fishing.
So it sounds like there's one set of rules for the big, corporate fishery. There's another set of rules for the independent commercial fishers, and then now now nobody really knows what the rules are for the Mi'kmaq fishers. I guess everybody that's fueling the tensions. What do you think needs to happen?
One point to really hammer home about the difference between those rules is that Clearwater wrote its own rules. They wrote their own management plan, and they co-chair their own management board, which is very unusual, and that is not the situation with small-scale fishers.
Well, thank you for shedding some light on this, because this is something I think a lot of us haven't realized, that kind of the Clearwater effect in all of this. And I thank you for the article that you have. That's on Canadians.org. You can read Robin's analysis piece there. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us, Robin.
No problem. Thanks.
Again, that piece is Trapped in conflict, how the corporate mega fishery Clearwater has set the stage for violent conflict in Mi'kma'ki. That is at Canadians.org. It's got a great explainer. Okay, we have another caller, Gilbert. Very quickly, we've got to go to a break here, but we will squeeze you in. Gilbert, you are come from a family of fishers yourself in northern Manitoba?
Northern Manitoba.
Yeah, what do you have to say about all this?
Well, what bothers me is that it seems like we don't have economic rights, and governments, provincial and federal, don't seem to recognize that. Like in my case, my community has lost estimated $15 to $20 million because of a loss of our fishery.
What's your community?
My community is Tickaport in Manitoba, and our main economic was fisheries, and through time, with the establishment of the city of Thompson, they basically removed us, and not considering that, hey, this is our livelihood.
I got to cut you off there, and I'm sorry that this is going on. We have to take a break. Gilbert, thanks so much for calling. We've got so much good stuff still ahead, including insight into the lobster side of all of this. We've got comments from you. Stay with us.
Conversation now. Call in toll free at 1-877-647-2786. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus, and send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back. Let's go now to social media with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what some of you guys are saying about today's topic.
Thanks, Melissa. We've had a lot of interesting feedback on the many stories posted about the lobster fishery. Online, InFocus asked, what are your thoughts on the Mi'kmaq fishing rights and the violence that is taking place in Nova Scotia? Let's take a look. Darlene said, it's sad that Mi'kmaq fear for their lives when going out on their boats. There's a lot more to the violence that has been going on for years. This is still happening today. Vanda said, before non-native license are renewed, they should be required to have completed treaty education. Joyce commented, you have to stop the violence right now. Hold the RCMP accountable to their uselessness and the agreement with the terrorizing ones. Enough is enough. Savvy said, our Mi'kmaq fishermen women on the front line are doing incredible, not matching the violent energy of the racists. From Leah, stop blaming the Indigenous people for your inept policies to extinguish treaties you have no intent to uphold. Missy said, the government is being reactive rather than proactive. And lastly, from Caroline, I'd be surprised if something even comes out of this. No arrests for their looting and destroying property, not to mention the hate messages being sent to First Nations. Thank you all to the viewers who commented. If you want to share your thoughts on Mi'kmaq fishing rights and the ongoing violence, here's how.
Join our conversation now. Call in toll free at 1-877-647-2786. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus, and send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
So I was honestly losing sleep last week watching everything that's going on the East Coast. I'm sure many of you felt the same way, the rage, the violence, and you're probably thinking, like, is this seriously about lobster? So in researching this, I came across two Nova Scotia scientists who seemed to know what's what. So I called them up just to get to the bottom of what's going on, and they did not disappoint. They're kind enough to join us now to help us all kind of understand the story behind the story, about the lobster. Both of these people are from Dalhousie University, very different areas of expertise. Megan Bailey's area is in cooperative management of shared fish stocks, traceability and informational governance, food security and fisheries, and market-based conservation. So things that I have zero knowledge of for the most part. Fred Wariski, he is a biologist. He's a Brown University graduate. I do believe this is our first Ivy Leaguer graduate that we have on our show. He's lived most of his life on the Atlantic coast. He's been on a great many marine science boards. He's currently the executive director of the Ocean Tracking Network. I learned so much from both Megan and Fred, and I'm so glad that you guys could come on and share your vast knowledge with our audience. So the first thing I want to throw out there, the commercial fishers, or do you want to, we have a caller. Do you want to go to a caller first? Let's do a caller first. Very quickly, I think it was Matt. Matt, you're calling from Ontario. I have honestly about 30 seconds for you, and then I'll have to cut you off.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, guys, this is domestic terrorism. I've seen this over and over again. It has to do with resources, the community of the people. There needs to be separation of business. All I see right now is the need for the Mi'kmaq people in Nova Scotia there to separate their business, go private, have a community of safety team, develop that, just like the Bear Clan in Winnipeg. It has to do with separation from people that don't understand. The European Canadians, in my opinion, do not want to stop and allow others to connect with Canadian opportunity. It's all about them. And I think First Nations and Indigenous people have to now separate, just like the French talked about years ago. It's about separation, privacy, security. And this is the way to go. Stop the racism comments. It's not working. It's domestic terrorism. That's all this is.
Awesome.
That's all this is.
Thanks for calling in, Matt. We appreciate your comments. Okay, I'm going to go now to our science friends. Fred and Megan, are you guys both there? I see you.
Having little technical difficulties, so we're working through those.
Awesome. Okay, well, this is the day and age that we're at now, right? It used to be we would have flown you here to APTN World Headquarters in Winnipeg to come and sit at the desk here with us, but here we are by Skype. So first things first, I want to throw out there, the commercial fishers have been saying through all of this is not about racism, that they respect the Mi'kmaq right to a moderate livelihood. Their concern is that the Mi'kmaq are fishing out of season, and B, that they're depleting shrinking lobster stocks. I'm going to start with a visual that's been widely shared all over social media that shows the size of the Shabaganagadie fishery compared to the other commercial lobster fishing that happens in this region. Megan, I was fascinated by what, when we spoke last week about what in season is all about. Can you share with us what's in season?
Sure, yeah. I mean, in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada generally, we've mostly chosen our seasons for economic reasons, in part so that different regions around the Maritimes can be part of providing the supply of hard-shelled lobsters. That's a more lucrative market, it's worth more. So that's what we've prioritized here. So the openings and closings when LFA 34, for example, which is where St. Mary's Bay is, when that closes in May, LFA 27 up in Cape Breton opens, and that's open from May to July. So we have these openings and closings in many regards, specifically to be able to provide a year-round supply of hard-shelled lobsters.
So it's not based on if you're fishing, well, I guess there's the soft-shelled lobsters, they are mating and they're molting, and so there's that. So if you're fishing those right now, does that mean that there is going to be some catastrophic effect on lobster numbers?
I mean, I think scale is really important here, right? So when we look to Maine, we know that Maine has a year-round fishery for lobster. So they catch them all summer. There's a soft-shell lobster market. Canada buys soft-shell lobster as well. So you can fish lobsters in the summer. There's no reason that you cannot fish them. But you have to take into account the scale of that fishery and the mortality on the lobster at a different time in their life cycle. But there's nothing inherently unsustainable about fishing in the summer.
Okay. Fred, I want to go to you. Let's talk about lobster numbers. Are you concerned with dwindling lobster stocks in the area that is being contested right now by the commercial fishers saying that this the Mi'kmaq moderate livelihood fishery is going to have a catastrophic impact on the lobster in that area?
complex question. Depending on the time scale on which you're looking at things, right now Nova Scotia is doing much better than it ever did before, and this is in part a function of conditions are improving here. And so lobster production in Nova Scotia is skyrocketing, and everybody's been doing better. But if you go back to about 2016 down in the St. Mary's Bay area, and you compare the landings to 2 years later, yeah, there was a dip down there. And people are concerned about lobster numbers whenever they go down because it has direct impact on the fisheries.
So, and I wanted to, that brings me to my next question, which is about, because we have heard that, and the stats are that there was, the numbers have dropped consistently over, I believe it to be 3 years. Megan, when we had a conversation, you had explained that that's kind of, it might be accurate, but there's a bigger picture around that too. If you look at the 17-year average for, I think is it called catch per unit? Is that the proper term for it? Can you explain? We're seeing a graph that you provided us here too, if you could explain that.
Yeah, sure. And I just want to say I can't hear Fred when he's speaking, so I apologize. I'm not sure what he said in that last segment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I'll answer your question and then anyway, I apologize that I couldn't hear Fred. So the graph is what we call catch per unit effort. So this is basically a relative abundance measurement that we can kind of monitor. So all it is the total amount of commercial lobster catch divided by the total number of individual vessels that are fishing within that lobster fishing area. So what we see between 2002 and 2018 is this up and down, right? There's a lot of variability. Mm-hmm. So that fish harvesters are upset that catches have gone down in the last couple of years. Yes, absolutely they have, but they were at a record high before that, right? And so this variability, when we look at that trend, there's nothing worrying about that. And so we don't generally look to catches as a very good measurement of abundance. We really want to see what are we catching for the amount of effort we're putting in and looking over time again. So it's not just 1 year. We don't manage a fishery kind of year to year like that. It's really over time. And so when I look at that graph and the data are from DFO, there's nothing about the last couple of years that seem problematic.
I love that. See, I'm so happy that we have you both on because those are brilliant answers and it's helping us to understand what's going on and kind of unspin some of the spin. Fred, you have growing up and spending most of your life in Atlantic Canada. You, I thought, had a really interesting perspective on lobster fishers in general. Like this is, that they are usually multi-generational, that they fish very specific territories that are handed down generation to generation. Can you share a little bit of that with our audience, just some of that background?
Sure. So if we go back to the beginning of all this, the Fisheries Act stipulated back 100 years ago nearly that DFO was supposed to extract the maximum value out of its resources. So in the management schemes that developed for lobster, they sort of upped the licenses to the point that they thought the resource could bear and would pull every lobster out of it that was possible. They then began to put these licenses out by district, and Megan described those a little bit earlier, and there's a certain number of people that can fish in each area. But these districts are large and people come out of small ports. And what has happened over time is historic and individual territories have developed, frequently passed down from family to family. And they develop by people basically putting their sharp elbows out there and elbowing other people out of the way. And you get to a point that a community will have established a number of people that can fish in a particular area. And the newcomer that comes into that area is met with a frosty reception. And sometimes this can actually trigger major violence. There have been a number of incidents, the most recent of which was one called for an individual named Philip Boudreau, who was killed up in Cape Breton over a dispute over lobsters up in those areas. So these communities have got that particular territoriality, and it's driven in part because this is a tough life. It's hard to get out there in the seasons where they're fishing frequently, and there's an awful lot of cheating that seems to go on. So people will put their traps out, and since there isn't 24-hour surveillance of them, they'll come back to pull them the next day, and somebody else has got there first and stolen all of their lobsters. And this, if it happens day after day after day, becomes a huge aggravation, and they get really aggressive.
And I appreciate, too, like when you had explained that to me before, when we spoke last week, that kind of helped frame the industry a little bit for me. So thanks for that, too. And I also find it quite dripping with irony that, fishers feel like because generations upon generations of them have been fishing from these waters and they're used to specific territory, that this is theirs. And it's like, well, that's exactly kind of what the Mi'kmaq are saying as well. I wanted to go to you, Megan. You have done a lot of media on this since this is all kind of blown up and it's been catching everybody's attention. You've been very clear about the science of this. You've been very clear and open about the numbers of lobsters, the impact this is having on the fishery. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the blowback that you've received after just, doing your job?
Yeah, it's been kind of nonstop month of emails that continues today. I think what it seems to exemplify for me is a lack of treaty education, which you spoke about earlier on the show, and that's fundamentally true. Some of the comments say there's only one Canada, there's only one set of rules, this is illegal, anything out of season is illegal, and that's just simply not true. And then there's also, I think, there's a livelihood fishery, absolutely, but there's also a food social ceremonial fishery, FSC, under Sparrow, that also takes place in the bay and in that lobster fishing area. And so the moderate livelihood launch is kind of the tipping point, but it's not that this is the first time fishing has been happening out of season in that bay. So I think that's important as well. There's been a fair amount of fishing in this region out of season, but again, that's legal. But I think commercial fish harvesters are upset about that as well.
Yeah, and we've heard that as well. This isn't specific to the Mi'kmaq moderate livelihood fishery. There's been boats sank, traps stolen, boats set ablaze. We've covered it here on this show too, and that's just from people going and out exercising their ceremonial and food licenses too. So I think we have another caller. Oh, somebody had said that we had a caller. We don't. We're almost out of time and I have to go to a break here, but I wanted to hear from you, Fred. What would you, like to see happen here to settle this all down?
Boy, first of all, people have got to stop the violence. There's got to be a recognition of the rights that are pertaining here, because we live in a better country when all the rights of individuals are respected. And I guess the third thing is somehow packaging whatever decisions are made about management, both from the First Nation side, but also from the federal government and the commercial fishermen side, into a single set of rules. And I think if that could be put together as one, and people could work from that same song sheet, that would go a long way towards beginning to smooth over the management regimes and maybe put some stability back into everybody's livelihood.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts and your intelligence with our audience as we're all struggling to try to make sense of it all. I found it very helpful. I hope everybody at home did as well. We have to take another break, but when we come back, we're going to chat about some of the asinine comments that have been made in response to what's happening from the RCMP to politicians. Pam Palmer is going to be here to weigh in on some of those comments, so stay with us.
There's roughly 200 persons on a side that is, very, very passionate toward what the issue at hand is, and then there's a smaller amount that are inside the processing plant, who are essentially trying to do what they feel they have the right to do.
Welcome back. Well, I wanted to say first, Jolene Maher, who we heard from earlier in the show from the Saldnerville Wharf, your sister, Karen, just called in during the break from Toronto, and she just wanted to say that she stands in solidarity with you, Jolene, and all the, and Mom, and all the Mi'kmaq fishers. She says to stay strong, so thanks, Karen, for calling in with that. Okay, so Pam Palmer is a well-known Mi'kmaq lawyer, an activist. She's been watching this all for the past 2 decades, and she's going to join us now from Toronto to discuss. I have to say to you, Pam, thanks for joining us. I have to ask, this can't really be news to you, because as somebody from the region, you've been watching this all go down for 20 years, and especially since the Marshall decision. Is there anything that's happening now that is surprising to you?
No, none of it's surprising. It's all very disappointing and disheartening, because you think decade after decade, things might change, that maybe the RCMP might take action to protect the Mi'kmaq like they didn't 20 years ago. But of course, that's not the case. So we just have to keep marching forward and keep defending our rights.
You'd said today, or you tweeted today actually, anybody who's convicted of this violence should just lose their fishing licenses. I think that that's something, a sentiment a lot of people have heard. What sort of reaction did you get to that comment?
Oh, well, a lot of people were reacting saying, well, doesn't that just make sense? If you use your fishing boat in a way that endangers the lives of other people, doesn't that violate all of the fishing regulations? And doesn't that put your license at risk? And I say also for the buyers, because you have to be licensed to be buyer-seller, if you're using racist motivations to not buy or sell Mi'kmaq lobster, then you should also lose your license. And I think people need to think very deeply about the kinds of racist acts they're engaging in and the kinds of crimes or regulatory offenses that could attach to that, including their licenses.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, I want to play a little fun game with you now where we're going to listen to, we're either going to see a clip or we're going to read a clip, and then I'd love to hear your response to that. Let's start with the RCMP. I think we have the clip. Do we have a video clip of that? Okay, we're going right to the RCMP. Watch this.
The RCMP understand what the issue here is. We don't see it as a police issue, but we understand both sides, and we understand the passion and what they are bringing to the table, and we respect that.
So this isn't a police issue, and he understands and respects both sides.
Okay, well, first of all, that explains why they were sitting around texting on their phones and not actually stopping these violent criminal offenses if they don't consider it a policing issue. And second of all, how can you have passion and understanding for violence and arson and endangering people's lives and what could ultimately be found to be terrorism? I mean, they couldn't have declared their bias any deeper than that. You don't look at a victim and a perpetrator and say, oh, I understand both sides. Yeah. I understand why he shot you with that weapon. I mean, give me a break. They're the RCMP.
Okay, let's go now. This Conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole, he put out a press release on this. He said, for weeks, Conservatives have been calling on Trudeau's Fisheries Minister, Bernadette Jordan, to do her job and immediately negotiate with the Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq to fulfill Canada's obligations under the Marshall decisions and to include commercial fish harvesters in these discussions, as their livelihoods will be greatly affected. So my question to you is, do you believe that the commercial fishers should be sitting down at the table with the DFO and the Mi'kmaq to determine what the assertion of their rights should entail?
Of course not. The treaties were signed on a nation-to-nation basis. Treaties can only be signed, even under international and European law, as between nations. Those commercial fishermen are an interest group, a stakeholder at best. They are not a nation. They are not part of the treaties, and they certainly should not be at the table with, those kinds of racist attitudes and interfering with the treaty process. I mean, they weren't there when the treaty was signed. They haven't respected the treaty since, and they certainly don't have a seat at the table. That said, though, that doesn't mean that the government of Canada isn't going to take their stakeholder interests into account. Yeah. But that doesn't in any way impact the constitutionally protected treaty right. And I would remind Mr. O'Toole that it has been many, many years that also the Conservatives have failed to sit down and negotiate the livelihood for Mi'kmaq people, not just the last few weeks under the Liberal government. So there's lots of blame to go around.
Tons of blame to go around. Okay, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to do this one. This is from lobster fishers have said this is not about racism. It's not about being anti-Mi'kmaq rights. This is just about saving the lobsters. And Colin Spruill, who is the president of the Bay of Fundy Inshore Fishermen's Association, he led in the removal of several Mi'kmaq traps earlier on, and he's saying this. They're fishing out of season, and this is a quote from the Halifax Chronicle Journal that's from him. The gear that we were collecting was in violation of the law, Spruill said. There's nothing more to show. The fishermen have the true, the just, the lawful position here. than the fact, by fact that we conducted this activity and nobody stopped us. So this is, he's saying in the context of this that DFO was there, watched them remove these traps, and so therefore it must be legal and lawful and true and right, because if it wasn't, the DFO would have stopped them from doing this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think DFO and RCMP are complicit in the violence. When they allow it to continue, it sends the wrong message that, you know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we aren't going to arrest you. However, these fishermen know it's against the law. They have been making hundreds of posts on social media saying that they're taking the law into their own hands. They know well and good this has nothing to do with conservation. Conservation is a dog whistle for conserve the fish only for non-native fishermen and keep the Indians out. That's what that means. Because if we had any real concern about conservation, we would have looked at Clearwater, one of the massive commercial fishing operations, who was convicted not even a year ago for violating all these conservation regulations and jeopardizing other species, even beyond lobster. And we know the commercial fishing industry has both overfished and violated these regulations. You don't see Mi'kmaq people doing that.
Yeah. Well, and certainly before we talked to you, we heard a lot about exactly that, Clearwater, commercial fishers, just the history of fishing there. It sounds like it's quite the interesting, I don't want to say racket, but it sounds a little bit like that. It's kind of a wild west a little bit, a wild east, I guess you could say. Thanks for joining us, Pam. We are all out of time for our show. We had to cram a lot into this show. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Thanks to our viewers. We love it, you tuning in here and leaving your comments and your questions on our Facebook Live. We appreciate all of that. Thank you so much to our guests for helping us to make sense of this. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great rest of your day.